I knew something was wrong the moment my granddaughter said, "Grandma, can I borrow your jewelry for a TikTok?" Not because of the TikTok. I've lived long enough not to fear a camera. But because of the way she looked at my hands, not at my face, as if the rings were alive and I was already gone. Lily breezed into my living room that afternoon, the way young people enter places they don't plan to stay in. Quick glances, quick steps, quick judgments. She was 19, always in a hurry, always louder than necessary, always carrying that phone as if it were a heart she couldn't live without. I watched her circle the room, filming casual fragments, the mantle, the cabinet, the locked drawer in the corner. All of it accidental, though nothing about Lily ever was. "Grandma, you have such aesthetic vintage pieces," she said, aiming her phone at me. "I want to do a video where I, transform into a classy lady. It'll be cute." Cute. That word again. They use it when they want something without earning it. I sat straighter in my chair. My joints ached, but dignity doesn't depend on healthy knees. "Which pieces are you talking about, dear?" "All of them," she said lightly. "The pearls, the emerald brooch, the gold bangles. Oh, and that velvet jewelry box in your bedroom, the one with the little brass lock. I saw it last time." I hadn't shown her that box. She must have gone through the drawers while pretending to look for a charger. I remember the way she'd wandered down the hall, humming loudly, keeping her phone pressed to her chest as if hiding something behind it. And now she mentioned the one box with actual value. The last things my husband left me. I forced my voice to stay steady, quiet, the way women my age learn to speak when they know the wind is shifting. "Why do you need the box?" She shrugged. "Props. People love shiny stuff in videos." "Please, Grandma. It's not like you wear it." That stung more than she knew. Age shrinks your world enough without someone pointing out what you no longer use. She kept filming as she talked. My carpet, my shelves, even the latch of the cabinet I kept locked. "I'll bring everything back. Promise," she sang, her voice sweet like frosting that hides the taste of something spoiled. "Does your father know you're asking me for these things?" I asked. She rolled her eyes. "Dad doesn't need to know everything. Besides, he said anything you're not wearing is basically meant for me anyway." I exhaled slowly. My son always had a way of giving things away before they were his to offer. Lily moved closer and put a hand on my arm. Her nails were long, sharp, painted a glossy red. "Grandma, don't make this weird. Just let me borrow them. I'll film the unboxing today." Unboxing. How modern, how efficient, how easy it is to package a person's life into content. I looked at her phone. The camera was still on. Recording. Not aimed at me. Aimed at the hallway leading toward the bedrooms. Her intentions weren't hard to read. I may be 78, but there's nothing wrong with my eyesight when it comes to human nature. "Lily," I said softly, "why don't you sit for a moment? Have tea with me." "I can't. I'm late." She stepped back, impatience flickering on her face. "So, can I take the jewelry or not?" I let a small smile touch my lips. A smile I hadn't used in years. One that meant I'd already made a decision. "Come back tomorrow," I told her. "I'll have everything ready." Her eyes lit up with triumph, not gratitude. She didn't even hide it. "Great. Make sure the box is unlocked. It'll look better on camera." Then she rushed out, calling over her shoulder, "You're the best, Grandma." No, I thought as the door closed behind her. Not the best. Just finally awake. Tomorrow she'd receive a box, but not the one she expected. Lily arrived the next afternoon the same way she always did. Brisk, confident, smelling of perfume too sharp for my quiet house. But this time she wasn't alone. A young man waited outside in the car, the engine still running. I saw him through the curtain. He kept glancing at the front door as if checking how long she'd be. I pretended not to notice. Inside, Lily didn't bother with greetings. "Did you get everything?" she asked, scanning the room the way a crow scans a field, looking for something shiny to steal. Her phone was already in her hand. Recording again. I nodded toward the living room. "The box is there," I said. I'd placed a small velvet jewelry case on the coffee table. Not the real one, of course. This one I had packed with old costume pieces from the thrift store. Trinkets with a nice sparkle, but no value. She didn't know the difference. She didn't care to. Lily rushed to it like a child grabbing candy. She opened the lid and gasped theatrically. "Oh, perfect," she breathed, but the delight was false, exaggerated, designed for an audience not present in the room. She lifted a cheap rhinestone necklace into the light. "This will look amazing on camera." Her voice was syrup sweet, but her eyes had no warmth in them, only calculation. She rummaged through the box, pushing aside brooches, bracelets, fake pearls. "Where's the emerald brooch? The heavy gold one? The rings?" "Those pieces aren't in this box," I said simply. She looked up sharply. "Why not?" "Those belong to my husband," I answered, keeping my tone calm, steady. "I don't lend them out." Her lips pressed together. "Grandma, you promised." "No," I corrected gently. "I said I would have something ready for you." She let out a sharp breath, annoyed. "But this stuff is... Ugh, it doesn't look real." "It isn't real," I said. Her eyes narrowed for a moment before softening again, turning syrupy and pleading. "Grandma, come on, please. This is for my project. And you know how Dad said..." "I know what your father says," I cut in. "And I also know he doesn't live here." The sweetness vanished. "Fine," she said flatly. "I'll take this for now." She snapped the lid shut. "Can you at least unlock the other box next time? The one in your bedroom? I know that lock is old. I could help with it if you can't manage." Her words were casual. Her eyes were not. "I'll think about it," I said. She shrugged, grabbed the box under one arm, and headed for the door. But before leaving, she paused by the cabinet in the corner, the one with the sturdy lock. Her phone tilted ever so slightly, catching the latch, the hinges, the position of the keyhole. Then she flashed a smile at me. "See you tomorrow, Grandma. You're amazing, really." She walked out, and I watched through the window as she handed the box to the young man in the car. They didn't drive off immediately. I saw them talking, her pointing toward my house again. He nodded. They finally left, but unease lingered in the air like cigarette smoke. I sat down slowly, letting my breath settle. Every movement reminded me of my age, yet something inside me felt sharper than it had in years. She wasn't coming for content. She was coming for what she thought she was owed. And that meant she would be back. I stood and walked to my bedroom. The real jewelry box, the wooden one with the brass lock, sat where it always had. I picked it up carefully and placed it inside the bottom drawer of my dresser, the one with the false back panel my husband built decades ago. Then I reached for the documents folder I kept in my closet. A thin layer of dust had settled on it. It seemed I would need to speak to my lawyer sooner than I thought. But tonight, the house was silent. And in that silence, a decision formed. Clear, firm and long overdue. Tomorrow, she would return with more confidence, and I would be ready to meet her with something far stronger than fear. My son called that evening, though called is a generous word for what it was. His voice came through the phone, rushed, distracted, as if he were driving or typing or doing anything except talking to his mother. "Mom, Lily said you gave her some jewelry today," he began, not even a hello. "I did," I answered. "Some pieces." He sighed, the kind of sigh he'd perfected over the years. Irritated, weary, as if I were a minor inconvenience in a very important life. She was expecting more. She said you're being difficult. I sat at the kitchen table, the teacup warm between my palms. "Is that what she told you?" "Yes," he said. "Mom, she's working hard on this social media project. She's trying to build something. The least we can do is support her." I almost laughed. "I didn't say no," I replied. "I simply gave her what I felt comfortable giving." "Mom," his tone sharpened, as if addressing a stubborn employee rather than the woman who raised him. "She needs the valuable pieces, the ones Dad left you. She said they'll make the video stand out. That emerald brooch alone." "That brooch is not for TikTok," I said calmly. He paused, just long enough for me to hear the frustration collect. "You're being unreasonable. You don't even wear it." "Not wearing something doesn't mean it belongs to someone else," I answered. He exhaled loudly. "She's your granddaughter. You could be more giving." Giving. Another word that tasted like old wounds. "Do you remember the last time Lily visited just to see me?" I asked. "Without a camera? Without wanting something?" He didn't respond. "Do you remember the last time you visited just to see me?" A longer silence. Then, with forced patience, he said, "This isn't about visits. This is about helping family." I looked at the thin steam rising from my tea. Helping or being used? "Mom," he snapped, "don't start with that. Lily told me about the box in your bedroom. She said it's full of valuable items and you're being secretive. If you're worried about the lock, I can have someone look at it." "There's nothing wrong with the lock," I interrupted. "Then why not give her the jewelry? She's your flesh and blood." I let his words settle. Flesh and blood, as if that alone were enough to erase entitlement. "Because," I said quietly, "I have reasons to be cautious." He groaned. "Mom, please don't complicate things. Lily is upset. She says you don't trust her." "I trust her," I answered, "to act exactly as she has been acting." He didn't like that. His voice grew colder. "You know, Mom, you've always been dramatic, always assuming the worst. Lily is a good kid." Good. I had seen her record my cabinet hinges with the confidence of someone who believed the owner wouldn't notice. "I'm not discussing this anymore," he said abruptly. "Just think about what I said. Lily will stop by tomorrow. Try to be kinder." Kinder. If only he knew how kind I'd been, far longer than was wise. "Good night," I said. He didn't say it back. When the call ended, the house returned to its familiar quiet. But tonight, it felt different. No longer comforting, but clarifying. My son was not going to protect me. He wasn't even trying to. He was protecting the fantasy that his daughter was owed whatever she wanted. I placed the phone face down on the table. The lamp beside me cast a soft glow across the room. Shadows stretched long across the floorboards. I realized then that Lily and my son were similar in ways I'd never allowed myself to admit. Quick to expect. Quick to demand. Quick to reshape the world around their desires. and slow to see the damage they left behind. I rose carefully, the stiffness in my back reminding me how slowly the body forgives age. I walked to the hallway closet, pulled out the folder of legal documents, and set it on the table. Tomorrow, before Lily returned, I would speak to my lawyer. There were decisions to be made, decisions I had postponed for too many years, hoping things might mend on their own. But tonight, I let the quiet settle again, familiar and steady. It felt like standing in a doorway between two lives, the one where I endured and the one where I finally said enough. The choice between them no longer felt difficult. It felt necessary. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from worry. Worry is a habit I trained myself out of after my husband died. But from the quiet certainty that tomorrow would change something in my life. Something that had been frozen for years. When morning finally came, I made tea, put on my navy cardigan, and gathered the folder of documents I had taken from the closet the day before. It felt heavier than it was. Paper often feels that way when it carries truth you've avoided. My lawyer's office was across town, near the courthouse. I hadn't been there in 2 years, not since he helped me settle a small land boundary dispute with a neighbor. He had been gentle then, patient with my questions, never once making me feel like an old woman fumbling through legal terms. That mattered more than I had ever admitted aloud. The receptionist recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Hale, it's been a while. Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but I have urgency." She nodded with the understanding of someone who has seen urgency come in many shapes and ages. "Let me check with Mr. Caro." After a moment, she guided me into his office. My lawyer, a tall man in his 60s with clear gray eyes, rose to shake my hand. "Mrs. Hale," he said warmly, "what brings you in today?" I sat across from him, placed the folder on his desk, and folded my hands in my lap to keep them from trembling, though not from fear, more from the weight of resolve. "I need to update my will," I said, "and create a secure arrangement for my valuables." He nodded calmly. "All right, we can do both." "What sort of arrangement are you considering?" "A transfer of physical items into protected custody," I said, "and a revision of beneficiaries." He studied me for a moment. "Has something happened?" I held his gaze. "I believe my granddaughter intends to remove items from my home without permission." He didn't react dramatically. No raised brows, no gasp. A good lawyer knows that life is rarely tidy. Instead, he leaned slightly forward. "Do you want to file a report?" "Not yet," I said. "But if something does happen, I want the paperwork ready, and I want my estate secured." He began drafting notes. "We can move the jewelry to a safety deposit box today. That will require your signature. As for the will, do you wish to remove your son or granddaughter?" The question was simple. The answer was not. Removing someone from a will feels like severing the last thread between you. "I want to adjust their shares," I said slowly, "and add a clause. If either attempts to take property from me while I'm alive, their inheritance is forfeited." "That is legally sound," he said, "and wise." Wise. It had been a long time since anyone called me that. He printed the preliminary documents and slid them across the desk. I read every word. Age may dull the joints, but it sharpens caution. When I signed, it felt like signing a small freedom. Afterward, we drove together to the bank. The safety deposit box they assigned me was narrow, long, lined in brushed metal. I placed the real jewelry box inside with both hands. My husband's ring glinted briefly in the fluorescent light before the lid closed. I felt a quiet calm settle over me. You've done the right thing, my lawyer said gently. I know, I replied. For once, I know. He drove me back home. The afternoon light made long shadows across my porch steps. When I stepped inside the house, I felt its silence differently, stronger, like the house itself approved of my decisions. I had just hung my cardigan on the hook when I noticed something that tightened the air around me. The curtain by the living room window was slightly parted. I hadn't opened it. Someone had looked in. Recently. I walked further, slow but steady. On the floor near the cabinet was a faint smudge, the shape of a shoe sole dragged over the wood. Lily had been wearing soft sneakers yesterday. This print was from something heavier. Someone else had been here. I checked the locks. Everything was closed, but that didn't soothe me. Some doors don't have to be open to be violated. Sometimes the intention alone is enough. I sat down, letting the room settle around me. Today, I had drawn a boundary in ink and law. Tomorrow, I suspected, I would need to draw one in action. I woke before sunrise the next morning, not because of nerves, but because age teaches you to rise early even when you'd rather rest. My house was still, the kind of stillness that feels like it's listening. I moved through the rooms slowly, checking the locks again, not out of fear, but to confirm that I hadn't imagined yesterday's intrusion. Nothing had been taken. Nothing was broken. But the curtain was still parted a fraction wider than I ever leave it. A small detail, but in a quiet life, small details speak loudly. By 7, I had finished breakfast and dressed. I didn't expect Lily until the afternoon, yet I wanted the day to meet me prepared. I placed my handbag near the front door, set out the papers Mr. Caro had given me, and adjusted the fake jewelry box on the coffee table. I even dusted around it carefully, so no one could claim I'd set a trap. Age protects you in some ways, but the appearance of frailty can be twisted when the young are looking for excuses. Around 9, I heard a car outside. Not Lily's usual bubbly music, not her friend's thumping engine. This one idled quietly, as if trying not to be noticed. I looked through the window. It was the same young man from before, the one Lily had handed the box to. He sat in the driver's seat, glancing toward my house every few seconds. Lily wasn't with him. I stayed by the window, hidden behind the curtain, watching. After a few minutes, he stepped out of the car and walked toward my front porch. He didn't knock. He didn't call out. Instead, he bent slightly and inspected the front door, examining the lock, the hinges, the frame. My heart stayed remarkably calm. Strange how the body reacts when the mind has already accepted a truth. After a moment, he returned to the car and drove off. Not quickly, not nervously, as if checking his route. I sat down slowly. Whatever Lily had planned, she hadn't planned it alone. The rest of the morning passed in measured silence. I folded laundry, watered my plants, and answered a call from the pharmacy. I performed each task with the deliberate care of someone holding on to ordinary life while expecting it to tilt. But even ordinary life felt different now, heavier, but clearer. At noon, I stepped outside to fetch the mail. Across the street, my neighbor, June, waved. She was a kind woman in her 50s, always smiling, but sometimes too curious. Today, she called out, "Everything all right, Martha? Saw a young fellow poking around earlier. Thought he was one of your relatives." I forced a polite smile. "Just someone visiting Lily." "Well," she said, lowering her voice as she approached the fence. "He looked like he was measuring something. I almost asked him what he was doing." Her tone carried the gentle judgment of someone who likes to keep a tidy neighborhood. I placed the mail under my arm. "You don't need to worry," I said. "I have things handled." June squinted at me as if unsure whether to push for more information. Then she nodded. "If you need anything, you just let me know." "I will," I said, though we both knew I wouldn't. Back inside, I set the mail aside. One envelope had my son's handwriting on it, though I didn't open it. He hadn't written me a letter in over a decade, only texts, rushed calls, demands for favors. Whatever was inside could wait. It was nearly 3 when Lily finally appeared. No knock, just the doorbell pressed 3 times in quick succession, as if she were summoning me, not requesting entry. I opened the door. She stepped in without waiting, her hair tied up, her expression tight with forced cheerfulness. Behind her sunglasses, her eyes were flickering in sharp, restless darts across the room. "Grandma," she said, too brightly, "did you think more about the other jewelry? The real pieces?" I gestured toward the living room. "Come sit down." She didn't move toward the sofa. Instead, she hovered near the cabinet again, her fingers tracing the air just inches from the lock, as though rehearsing something. "I want to help you organize things," she said, voice soft but wrong. "I can clean out the drawers, make space. You shouldn't have heavy stuff lying around." I watched her carefully. "I don't need help organizing." "Well," she laughed lightly, "you do have a lot of old things." She didn't mean objects. She meant me. I walked past her and sat in my chair. "Lily, if you want something, ask plainly." She smiled again, a rehearsed smile. "Okay, plain then. I want the real jewelry. The expensive stuff. Dad says it'll all be mine someday anyway." That settled something inside me. Not anger, not hurt, but clarity. "I don't loan out those items," I said evenly. "Not for TikTok, not for anything." Lily's smile cracked. "Grandma, you're making this so hard." "No," I said softly. "I'm making it simple." She crossed her arms, eyes darting again to the hallway. "Fine. Whatever. I'll just take this for now." She grabbed the fake jewelry box. "I'll be back tomorrow." "I know," I said. She didn't hear the meaning behind it, but she would soon enough. She slammed the door behind her, loud and careless. When the house fell silent again, I breathed in the stillness. The day was no longer tilting. It was turning, and I was turning with it. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing the house the way a woman my age prepares for winter. Slowly, quietly, with more intention than strength. Not out of fear, but because I'd finally stopped pretending this situation was harmless. Lily wasn't just impulsive. She was planning something, and that young man outside wasn't simply giving her a ride. They were mapping my house, looking for openings, waiting for the moment I'd be unguarded. But I wasn't unguarded anymore. On the dining table lay the small wooden box I'd been working on since early morning. The decoy. The trap. Not the cheap trinket box Lily already had, but something more convincing, more dangerous for those who acted without thinking. I had lined the interior with soft fabric, the same blue velvet my husband once used when he repaired watches. I placed inside it a few pieces of costume jewelry that looked real under dim light. But the important object was the tiny camera I'd fixed into the lid. A technician at the hardware store helped me pick one out a month ago, though he probably thought I was worried about raccoons on the porch. The camera was no bigger than a coat button. When the lid opened, it faced straight outward, recording in silence. And beneath the false bottom, I'd fitted a slim GPS tracker, something I'd bought years ago for my suitcase but never used. Now it had a purpose. I closed the box and turned it in my hands. It looked exactly like the real one I had stored safely in the bank. Same size, same weight, same keyhole carved by my husband long ago. The only thing missing was actual value. I placed it gently on the hallway table. If Lily or her friend tried to take anything tonight or tomorrow, they would take that. The evidence would follow them on its own. By 5 o'clock, the sky began to dim. I drew the curtains halfway, leaving the living room in soft gray light. I didn't want to give anyone outside a clear view of where I moved. Age makes you cautious, but it also makes you strategic. I made myself tea, though I didn't drink much of it. My hands were steady, surprisingly steady for 78. It's remarkable how clarity can do for one's nerves what sleep cannot. As evening settled in, I heard movement outside, a car slowing, the quiet hum of an engine idling near the corner. I didn't approach the window. I simply listened. Footsteps followed, not on my porch yet, but near the walkway. Someone was checking the perimeter. I sat in my chair, spine straight, eyes on the front door. I wasn't the frightened old woman Lily must have imagined. I was a woman who had lived through loss, through bills I couldn't afford, through nights when my husband's breath waned and then vanished beside me. Compared to that, a granddaughter's greed felt small, not painless, but small. A soft knock came, not Lily's usual impatient tapping. 2 gentle raps, then silence. I didn't answer. Another knock, slightly louder. Still, I stayed seated. Finally, I heard the sound of retreating footsteps, the quiet crunch of gravel under shoes. A few seconds later, a notification blinked on my phone. The camera outside had detected motion. Someone had been at my front door with their sleeve pulled high over their hand, as if avoiding leaving prints. Not Lily. The young man. He left after inspecting the lock again. At least he seemed consistent. When the house grew quiet, I stood and walked to the hallway. I picked up the decoy jewelry box and opened it once more, checking the camera. A small red light blinked twice. Armed, ready. I placed it on the table beside the coat rack, right where a careless intruder would think I'd hidden something recently used. I kept the lamp off. Darkness makes thieves confident. Before bed, I double-checked the back door and the windows. Everything was in place. My real valuables were safe in the bank. My papers were secure. My intentions were clear. Tomorrow, Lily would return again, this time expecting compliance, maybe even submission. But I had learned something important these past few days. When someone stops seeing you as a person, the only way to protect yourself is to stop playing the role they assigned you. Tonight, my house was quiet. Tomorrow, it would not be. Lily arrived the next afternoon wearing the same bright smile she used whenever she wanted something from me. But her eyes gave her away. They darted around the room before landing on the hallway table where the decoy jewelry box waited. She didn't even greet me. "Grandma, I'm in such a rush today," she said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "I just need to grab the box and go. I'm filming a whole transformation video tonight. It'll be huge." She reached for the box immediately, her movements quick and practiced, as if she'd rehearsed them. I watched her fingers brush the lid, lightly, almost tenderly, as though she were touching something she believed already belonged to her. "I see," I murmured. "And what exactly will you do with it?" She waved her free hand dismissively. "Just show it off. People love vintage. Oh, and," she leaned closer, Can you unlock the other box tomorrow? The real one? I know you've got more. Dad said you're being cautious because you're old-fashioned. Old-fashioned? Not careful. Not protective. Just outdated. I'll think about it, I said calmly. Lily gave a bright, impatient laugh. Well, don't think too long. Opportunities move fast, Grandma. Then, as if remembering something, she lifted her phone and tilted the camera toward my hallway. Hold on. I need a quick shot of the aesthetic background. She wasn't filming the background. She was filming the layout. Her voice softened. You know, Grandma, you really don't need all this. I mean, you barely go out. Wouldn't it be better if someone else, someone young, put these pieces to use? I met her gaze. Do you think I owe them to you? She blinked, surprised I'd asked so plainly. Well, eventually, yeah. Dad said. I raised a hand gently. I know what your father says. Her smile thinned. For a moment, she tried another tactic. She softened her voice, lowered her shoulders, even reached for my arm. I just want to make pretty things, Grandma. And you always told me to follow my dreams. Dreams that somehow always required money, gifts, or now, jewelry. Take the box, I said finally, nodding toward it. If you need it for your video, then take it. Her face brightened instantly. Triumph, not gratitude. I could almost see the calculation behind her eyes. Finally, the old woman is giving in. She hugged me quickly, though her arms barely touched me. Thank you. Seriously, you're the best. She lifted the box, heavier than she expected because of the tracker inside, but she didn't seem to notice. I'll bring it back tomorrow. You won't need to rush, I said quietly. She didn't hear the meaning. She was already halfway out the door. But before leaving, she paused on the porch and looked back at me. Her expression shifting, just for a second, from excitement to something colder, as if checking whether I suspected anything. Then the smile returned. See you tomorrow, Grandma. I watched her run to the car. The young man was waiting behind the wheel. She slid inside, and they drove off quickly, not down the main road, but toward the old industrial area, an odd direction for someone going home. Inside, my house settled back into silence. But now the silence felt different, heavier, expectant. The box was gone. The camera was recording. The GPS would soon start moving, and tomorrow, when she returned, she would come not as a granddaughter, but as someone who believed she had succeeded. That, I thought, is when the truth would begin to show itself. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and let the room grow still again. The night ahead would be long, but I had patience. Age gives you that much at least, and patience was exactly what I needed now. That evening, I kept the lamps off. Not out of fear, but because darkness makes it easier to listen. And I needed to listen. Needed to understand what Lily would do now that she believed she had something valuable in her hands. At first, nothing happened. Only the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Then, around 7, the phone in my pocket vibrated. A notification from the GPS app. The tracker inside the decoy box had activated. The little dot moved across the map, slow at first, then with purpose. Not toward Lily's house, not toward her friend's apartment. The route curved toward the old storage units near the industrial edge of town, a place where no one asked questions, and people rented cheap spaces to hide expensive mistakes. I watched the dot travel, my breath steady. There was a time in my life when such a discovery would have broken me, when I'd have cried, begged, blamed myself. But now I simply observed. There's a clarity that only comes when you've lived long enough to see people's patterns more clearly than they see their own. 10 minutes later, the dot stopped moving. It pulsed in place. I set my phone aside. The box was out of my house. The evidence was collecting itself. My role, for now, was only to wait. Outside, a car slowed near my house again. I recognized the muffled rumble of the same engine from earlier that week. I didn't approach the window. Instead, I sat in my chair, hands folded, listening to footsteps approach the porch. A soft metallic sound followed. Someone testing the door handle. The door didn't open. Another attempt. Still nothing. Then a whispered curse from a young male voice. The same man Lily had brought with her before. He lingered there a moment longer, as if weighing whether to push harder before retreating to the car. The engine revved, then faded into distance. He was expecting my house to be empty, expecting I'd be asleep early, expecting that an old woman wouldn't notice what stirred around her. He was wrong on all counts. As the night deepened, I kept the GPS map open beside me. The dot remained still, unmoving inside what must have been one of those storage units. Whoever had the box was examining it, maybe filming it, maybe planning to sell it before sunrise. It didn't matter. Inside the lid, the small camera was recording every second. By 9 o'clock, I felt the first tremor of fatigue run through me. Age is honest. It doesn't pretend to ignore tired bones. But I wouldn't sleep yet. Not until I understood the rhythm of tonight. At 9:30, my phone buzzed again. This time a message from my son. "Mom, Lily says she'll need the rest of the jewelry tomorrow. Please don't make this difficult." Difficult. A familiar word in my family's mouths. Too convenient for them. Too easy. I turned the phone face down. Another GPS update arrived shortly after. The dot shifted slightly, only a few feet, but enough to tell me someone had picked up the box again, moved it deeper inside. Perhaps testing the weight, perhaps trying to pry open the false bottom. The camera would catch all of it, every face, every hand, every careless laugh. Around 10, a quiet peace settled over me. A peace I hadn't felt in years, not because the situation was resolved, but because the truth was finally moving into the open. I didn't have to chase it. It was walking directly toward me. I turned off the ringer on my phone, left only the vibration on. If the GPS moved again during the night, I would know. Otherwise, morning would greet me with whatever footage the camera had gathered. I stood slowly, the stiffness in my knees reminding me of my 78 years, and made my way down the hall. Before going to sleep, I checked the front door one last time, then the back door, then the window locks. Everything was secure. My house was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't the quiet of vulnerability. It was the quiet of preparation. When I finally lay down, the GPS dot was still glowing in the same small square of the map, unmoving, patient, recorded. I closed my eyes knowing that by tomorrow, whoever had taken that box would reveal themselves fully, and I would be ready to meet them with open eyes. I woke at first light, the kind of pale, cold light that slips into a house before the day decides what it will become. My phone sat on the nightstand, still showing the GPS map from the night before. The dot hadn't moved. Whoever had the box kept it through the night. Good. The longer they held it, the more evidence the camera gathered. I rose slowly, washed my face, brewed a small pot of tea. My hands felt steady, my breath even. Strange, how certainty makes the body strong in places where youth used to fail. At 8, the first vibration came. A notification from the camera. I opened the app. A new thumbnail appeared. Time stamped at 7:41 a.m. I tapped it. The footage loaded. The image was tilted slightly. The lid of the box opened just enough to reveal a dim, dusty room. Metal shelves, stacked cardboard boxes, graffiti on the far wall, a storage unit, just as I'd suspected. 2 figures moved into view, Lily and the young man. Lily wore the same jacket she'd had on yesterday, but her hair was uncombed, her expression tight and annoyed. "Are you sure it's real?" she snapped at him as she grabbed the edge of the box. "My grandma has expensive stuff." "I know she does." The young man shrugged. "Only one way to find out. We can pry the bottom open and check for a stamp." Lily leaned closer to the jewelry, picking through the pieces with clear disappointment. "It looks so cheap. Why would she hide junk?" "Sometimes old people don't know what they've got," he muttered. "Or they hide good stuff somewhere else. Didn't you say she had another box?" "She does," Lily said sharply. "And I'll get it. She's getting weaker every year. I just have to keep pushing." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. The camera caught everything. Her tone, her words, the way she rolled her eyes at the thought of me, as if I were a stubborn lock she intended to break. The video continued. The young man pulled out a small crowbar from his backpack. "Let's crack this open." Lily hesitated. "Wait, if there's something really valuable, maybe we shouldn't damage it. Maybe I can convince her to just, I don't know, hand over the collection tomorrow." "You told me she's clueless," he said. "So relax. We'll get what we need." He wedged the crowbar under the false bottom. The camera shook slightly as pressure was applied. Then the screen froze, likely the moment the tracker registered jolting movement and resumed again with a new angle. Lily was now bent over the box, her face fully visible. Young, pretty, sharp in ways that frightened me more than any stranger would. She wasn't desperate. She was entitled. That made her dangerous. "I swear," she muttered, "if she makes this difficult tomorrow, I'm done playing nice." The recording ended there. I sat back in my chair, letting the silence of the house settle around me. There was no grief in me, no shock, only a confirmation of something I had already known. Lily didn't see me as a grandmother. She saw me as a locked cabinet. At 10, the GPS dot moved again, slowly, leaving the storage unit and traveling across town. Within minutes, I received another notification. The camera was recording again. I tapped it. This time, the box was in the back seat of the young man's car. The view shook gently with the movement of the road. Lily's voice drifted from the front seat. "She better give me that real box tomorrow. I'm serious." The young man laughed. "And if she doesn't?" Lily sighed, irritated. "Then she won't get a choice." The footage ended as the car slowed near my neighborhood. I closed the app and placed my phone on the table, my decision settling into place like a final stone in a long, heavy wall. There was no more wondering, no more hoping, no more explaining their behavior as immaturity or stress or confusion. They had told me exactly who they were. My only task now was to believe them. I folded my hands in my lap and waited for the next step the day would bring. I didn't feel fear, only readiness. By the time the sun reached its highest point, my decision was no longer a thought. It was an action waiting to be taken. I set my teacup aside, picked up my phone, and dialed the non-emergency police line. I spoke clearly, slowly, without dramatics. Age teaches you that steady truth carries farther than trembling fear. "This is Martha Hale," I said. "I need to report suspected theft and provide video evidence." The dispatcher asked a few questions, then told me an officer would come by within the hour. I thanked her and hung up. My hands didn't shake. Not once. Strange how calm a person can be when the truth is finally on their side. I gathered everything: my phone, the printed GPS logs, the documents from my lawyer, and placed them neatly on the dining table. When the doorbell rang, precisely 40 minutes later, I felt no dread, only completion. 2 officers stood on the porch, a woman in her 40s and a younger man with sharp eyes. Their expressions were neutral but attentive. "Mrs. Hale?" the woman asked. "We received your report." I nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." They sat across from me at the dining table. I laid out the evidence in order, page by page, clip by clip. I didn't embellish anything. I didn't soften anything. I simply told them what had happened, what I had recorded, and what I suspected would happen next. The younger officer leaned forward as the video played, brows lifting slightly when he saw Lily's face appear. The woman took notes steadily, her pen moving in precise, even strokes. "Your granddaughter said these things to you directly?" she asked. "No," I answered. "She said them to the camera she didn't know existed." "And the man with her? Do you know him?" "No," I said. "Only that he has visited my property twice, both times without invitation." They exchanged a look, professional, assessing. The woman closed her notebook. "Mrs. Hale, you've done exactly the right thing. The evidence is strong. We'll be opening an investigation today. We'll also recover the box and identify the individuals on the footage." I nodded once. "Good." The younger officer hesitated before adding, "Do you feel safe staying here alone tonight?" I appreciated the question more than I expected. "Yes," I said firmly. "I've taken precautions." He looked at me with a quiet respect I hadn't seen in a long time. Not pity, not condescension. Respect. "We'll patrol the area tonight," he said, "just in case." They stood, thanked me again, and left with the evidence. When their car pulled away, the house felt strangely lighter, emptier, but in a good way, as if something poisonous had finally been carried out. I walked slowly to my chair by the window and sat down. Outside, the street was calm. The air had that clean, open feeling a place gets after a storm, even when no rain has fallen. For years, I'd believed silence kept peace. Now I understood silence had only kept me small. And today? Today was the first time I had chosen otherwise. The officers had been gone less than an hour when my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Lily, nor my son, but Detective Rowan, the woman officer who had taken notes at my table. Her voice was steady, professional, yet there was something careful in her tone, as though she were measuring her words before offering them. "Mrs. Hale, we've reviewed more of the footage," she said. "I'd like to stop by again to clarify a few points. Would that be all right?" "Yes," I answered. "Come whenever you're ready." She arrived 15 minutes later, alone this time. When I opened the door, she removed her hat, almost respectfully, and followed me to the dining room. She didn't sit immediately. She walked a small circle around the room first, taking in the layout, the cabinet, the hallway. Not suspicious, just forming a picture. "Your home is very orderly," she remarked quietly. "At my age," I replied, "order is cheaper than chaos." She smiled faintly, then sat. "I want to go over something you mentioned, about the young man visiting your door. The camera footage confirms he was with your granddaughter earlier. but I'd like to know if you ever interacted with him directly. No, I said. He never spoke to me, never knocked properly, only tested the door. Rowan nodded, jotting a note. That matches the neighbor's statements. Someone across the street reported seeing him leaning close to your porch. They didn't realize he wasn't expected. I breathed in slowly. So the neighborhood had been watching after all, even if from a distance. She placed her pen down. Mrs. Hale, what you did, gathering evidence, documenting activity, most people your age don't think to do it. That's because most people my age still believe their families would never harm them, I said, my voice steady. It takes living long enough to learn otherwise. Rowan didn't rush a reply. She studied my face, not with pity but with a kind of recognition. Perhaps she had seen this pattern before in other quiet houses belonging to people who had loved too generously. We've identified the young man, she said next. His name is Axel Barnes. He has 2 prior charges, both for theft. Nothing violent, but opportunistic. Opportunistic, a fitting word. And Lily? I asked. Rowan folded her hands. We're treating her as a primary participant. She handled the box, she transported it, she made the statements. The law doesn't excuse someone simply because the victim is their grandmother. I didn't flinch. I'd prepared myself for this truth days ago. What happens now? I asked. We'll retrieve the decoy box today, she said. We have officers at the storage units already. Once we have the footage and physical evidence, we'll bring both individuals in for questioning. I nodded once, slow and deliberate. Good. Rowan hesitated before adding, Mrs. Hale, I want you to understand something. You didn't cause this. Their choices are theirs. I looked at her, meeting her eyes fully. Detective, I stopped taking responsibility for other people's choices the day my husband died. Before that, I carried everything. After that, I learned what wasn't mine to hold. She exhaled, a small breath of acknowledgement. We spoke a few minutes longer, details, timelines, procedures. Nothing dramatic, just the machinery of consequences beginning to turn. When she rose to leave, she paused at the doorway. You're remarkably composed, she said. Most people facing what you're facing would be shaking. I was shaking, I said softly. Just not today. She gave a respectful nod and stepped outside. When the door closed behind her, the house settled again into its quiet, a quiet that no longer felt heavy, but purposeful. I returned to the kitchen and poured the rest of the tea into my cup. It had grown cold, but I didn't mind. The house felt unusually still that afternoon, as if it were waiting with me. I moved from room to room, not out of restlessness, but to remind myself that everything was where it should be. The curtains drawn halfway, the doors locked, the hallway table empty now that the decoy box was gone. Strange, how quickly absence can make a room feel cleaner. Just after 3, my phone buzzed. A message from Detective Rowan. We've recovered the box. Reviewing footage now. We'll update you soon. I sat down in my chair by the window. I didn't need more details. The camera would show everything it needed to show. I had given the truth a place to reveal itself, and it had taken the invitation. Minutes passed quietly. Then an hour. Outside, a breeze lifted the leaves on my porch, brushing them against the railing with a soft, steady whisper. It reminded me of nights long ago when my husband would sit beside me in silence, speaking only when the silence called for it. Age does that too. It teaches you that not every pause is empty. Around 4, a car door shut across the street. I lifted the curtain a little. June, my neighbor, stood beside her mailbox, sorting envelopes with her usual determined efficiency. She looked up, spotted me, and raised her hand in greeting. There was concern in her eyes now, subtle, hesitant, but present. She must have noticed the patrol car earlier. I nodded back. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer explanations. It was enough. I returned to the dining table and looked at the documents again, the revised will, the notarized statements, the safety deposit forms. Not out of doubt, but out of recognition. These papers weren't evidence of mistrust. They were evidence of boundaries finally drawn with ink instead of hope. Near 5, the phone rang. A call this time, not a message. "Mrs. Hale," Rowan said, "we've finished reviewing the footage. We'll be moving forward. Both individuals will be brought in tonight." Her tone was direct, but not unkind. "Did Lily cooperate?" I asked. "She hasn't been approached yet," Rowan replied. "We want to speak to her with the evidence in hand." I felt no satisfaction in that, only a kind of tired justice. "What should I do?" I asked. "For now, nothing. Stay home. We'll contact you when statements are needed." "Thank you," I said. She paused. "Mrs. Hale, we see cases like this, but rarely with evidence as clear as yours. Your preparation made all the difference." "Preparation," I said quietly, "is what a woman learns when people stop listening to her words." Rowan didn't disagree. The call ended, and the house fell back into its careful stillness. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a fresh cup of tea. I held it in both hands, letting the warmth soak into my fingers. The light outside had shifted into that soft gold that comes just before evening. I stood there a long time, listening to the familiar creaks of the old floorboards, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car passing down the street. Ordinary sounds. Steady sounds. The sounds of a life I had kept intact despite the people who assumed it was theirs to rearrange. Tomorrow would bring questions, paperwork, maybe apologies spoken too quickly to mean anything. But tonight, nothing more was required of me. I sat down at the kitchen table and closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the tea settle in my hands. It was enough for now. Lily showed up just after noon the next day, long before Detective Rowan said the police would contact her. She didn't knock gently or wait patiently. She hammered the doorbell 3 times, then again, louder, as if urgency could disguise fear. When I opened the door, she pushed inside without a greeting. "Grandma, what did you do?" she demanded. Her voice was high, shaky, but her posture was still defiant. Chin lifted, arms crossed, like a child trying to stand taller than her wrongdoing. "I filed a report," I said simply. "The evidence is with the police." Her face tightened. "Evidence? You set me up. You gave me that box on purpose." "I gave you a box," I corrected. "What you chose to do with it was your decision." She let out a frustrated, breathless sound. "You tricked me. You made me look like a criminal." I met her eyes steadily. "I didn't make you anything, Lily. The camera recorded who you already were." That struck her harder than I expected. Her mouth opened, then closed, as if the words she wanted to use couldn't quite find their shape. "You didn't have to call the police," she said, softer now, but not kinder. "You could have just talked to me. You didn't have to ruin my life." "Talk to you?" I repeated. "I tried. You filmed my house instead of listening. You planned to take things that weren't yours. You involved a stranger." She turned away from me, pacing, running her hands through her hair. "You don't understand. You don't get how hard it is right now. Everyone else has everything: views, money, connections. I'm trying, Grandma. I'm trying to build a life. You don't build a life out of someone else's possessions, I said quietly. She spun back toward me. You never support me. Never. You sit here with all your old stuff and expect me to… What? To just wait until you die? The words hung in the air, heavy, unsparing, not accidental. I breathed in slowly. Is that what you've been doing? Her eyes flickered. For a second, I saw the truth, raw and unfiltered, before she hid it behind anger again. I needed help, she snapped, and you chose strangers over your own family. I chose safety, I said, and dignity. She took a step closer, voice trembling. Dad is furious. He said you're blowing everything out of proportion. He said you're confused, that you don't remember things right anymore. There it was, the predictable defense. If an old woman speaks a truth her family doesn't like, call her confused. I lifted my chin slightly. The detectives didn't find me confused. That's because you lied to them, she burst out. Grandma, you know you did. You told them we were stealing from you. You recorded yourself planning it, I said. I didn't have to say anything. She froze. Then the anger drained out of her face, replaced with fear. The kind a young person feels when they realize the world is not as forgiving as they expected. Grandma, please, please fix this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I didn't mean it. I looked at her, really looked, at the pleading eyes, the trembling hands. The desperation that wasn't about remorse, but about avoiding consequences. You meant every word, I said softly. You just didn't expect anyone to hold you to them. Her breath caught, and she stepped back as if the air between us had shifted. I'm your granddaughter, she whispered, as if the word carried inherent absolution. And I am a person, I replied, one you tried to take advantage of. Silence spread between us like a slow, cold tide. Finally, she turned toward the door, not defeated, just cornered. You'll regret this, she said. You don't know what you're starting. I didn't answer. I watched her leave, watched the door close, watched the house grow quiet again. When the silence settled, it wasn't sharp. It was steady, and it felt, for the first time, like mine. Detective Rowan called early the next morning. Her voice was calm, matter of fact, the way professionals speak when the outcome is already decided. Mrs. Hale, we've brought both individuals in for questioning, she said. Your granddaughter arrived with her father. The young man was picked up at his apartment. I closed my eyes briefly. And the statements? Conflicting, she answered. But the footage is clear. The young man admitted to entering your property and attempting to access your door. He claims Lily told him you gave permission. She didn't, I said. We know, Rowan replied. That's why he's facing charges, but likely won't fight them. As for Lily, she's insisting she didn't intend to steal anything. She's describing it as a misunderstanding. I let out a slow breath. The camera shows intention. Yes, Rowan said gently. And that's what matters. She went on to explain the process. An official report, a formal caution, charges appropriate to their roles. Lily was being considered for a plea agreement. First offense, nonviolent, cooperative once confronted. But the intent was there. The planning, the involvement of another person. Those things carry weight, no matter how young the offender. And my son? I asked quietly. He was frustrated, Rowan said. But we made it clear you're not at fault. He is not part of the case. Of course he wasn't. He rarely was, even when he should have been. Rowan ended the call with a promise to update me once the paperwork finished. The moment I set the phone down, the house felt different again. Not lighter, not heavier. Just honest. A quiet place no longer forced to absorb other people's choices. By noon, my son appeared at the door. This time he knocked only once before stepping inside, his face flushed with anger. He didn't sit. He stood over me as if height were an argument. "Mom, what have you done?" he demanded. "Lily is devastated. She said you trapped her. She's scared out of her mind." "She had no fear when she planned it," I replied. "That's not the point." He rubbed his forehead, pacing. "You could have handled this privately. You didn't have to bring the police into it." "I did," I said, "because she wasn't acting privately." He stopped pacing. "She's a kid. Kids make mistakes." "She's 19, I answered. "That's not a child. And this wasn't a mistake. She meant to take what wasn't hers." He stared at me, breath heavy. "Mom, Lily is crying. She says you hate her." "I don't hate her," I said simply, "but I won't be used by her, or frightened in my own home." His expression shifted, confusion first, then something like disbelief, as if he'd never considered that I might choose myself over them. "You're overreacting," he muttered. "This is embarrassing." "For whom?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, his anger thinned into helplessness. "We're family, Mom." "Family forgives. Family also respects," I replied, "and protects, and doesn't lie. 3 things I haven't received from either of you in a very long time." He lowered his gaze then, shoulders sinking. Not in remorse, but in the realization that the conversation wasn't going the direction he expected. "I don't know how we come back from this," he said quietly. "That depends on you," I answered. "And on Lily. But not on me pretending nothing happened." He left without slamming the door, though I could hear the strain in his steps. The house settled again after he was gone, the silence returning like a familiar companion. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The day was calm, the sky a muted gray. Nothing dramatic, nothing symbolic, just a day. And maybe that was the real beginning of things changing. Not storms, not confessions, but a simple, steady truth finally allowed to stand. I stepped away from the window and let the quiet hold. The house was quiet again the next morning, but not the same quiet as before. This one felt earned. The kind that settles after a long storm, when the walls stop listening for footsteps and start breathing again. I moved through the rooms slowly, touching the back of a chair, smoothing the edge of a curtain, noticing small things I had ignored for years. My home felt like my own again, not a place waiting to be taken apart by someone else's ambition, but a place I had reclaimed piece by piece. Around 10, Detective Rowan called with the final update. Her voice carried that steady tone that means everything that could be done had been done. "Mrs. Hale, the case is processed," she said. "The young man accepted a plea. Your granddaughter is receiving a conditional sentence, probation, educational hours, restitution for the damage to your property." "I see," I said. "She won't have a record if she completes everything," Rowan added. "She'll be supervised closely." "That is her chance," I replied. "Whether she takes it is not my responsibility." Rowan paused, then said quietly, "You showed remarkable clarity through all this. I hope your family understands what you protected." "I protected myself," I said. "That has to be enough." After she hung up, I stood for a long moment with the phone in my hand. No anger rose in me, no triumph, only a settled truth. I had spent too many years hoping people would treat me the way I treated them. Life doesn't work that way. People take the shape you allow them, and I had allowed far too much for far too long. Near noon, I stepped outside to water my plants. The air was cool, a soft breeze moving the leaves in slow, thoughtful motions. June across the street waved as she loaded groceries into her car. This time, her wave wasn't polite curiosity. It was something warmer. Respect, maybe, or understanding. Inside, I brewed tea and sat at the kitchen table. My husband's chair sat across from me, empty but familiar. I rested my hands around the cup and let the warmth soak into my fingers. The house didn't feel lonely. It felt honest. Later that afternoon, my son called. The conversation was brief. He sounded tired, older than I remembered. "Mom," he said, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," I replied. "Just do better with her." "And with yourself." He was quiet for a long time. "Are you angry with me?" "No," I said. "But I'm done carrying more than what belongs to me." He didn't argue. That was new. He only whispered, "I understand." Though whether he truly did, time would decide. After the call, the house returned to its easy stillness. I sat by the window as the sun softened over the trees. My life hadn't become larger overnight. It hadn't become louder or brighter. But it had become mine again. A woman my age doesn't need dramatic victories. We need dignity. We need space to breathe our own air. And sometimes, the quietest boundary is the one that restores everything we lost without ever meaning to give it away. Evening settled, slow and gentle. I closed the curtains, washed my teacup, turned off the lights. My house, my rules, my peace. And for the first time in many years, I felt entirely, undeniably awake. If this story touched you, stay with me. There are more truths worth telling, quietly, but without fear.